All right, now this Ask Her Shinoe is, sorry, I have an itch. Okay, got it. This person said that they had a question about housing here, and they said that they have a cousin who said that a realtor in the area says that no one's really buying homes in Seattle, and that he was shocked by this because he thought that Seattle was a pretty hot housing market. Excuse me. Sorry. And so the guy wanted to know if this was true. So he's like, I thought that houses are selling like hotcakes. And he says it doesn't seem that way based on what his friend is saying. And there he mentions the location in the Puget Sound region, but I'm just going to go on ahead and say it. His cousin lives in Tukwila, right? Which is not far from Seattle. And so let me answer that, right? This is why I'm burping, is because this fizzy stuff. But be sure to join the Discord. It's going to be down in the description box below. I think that Seattle's problem is a lot of different things. I don't think that it's people that are leaving the city, and I don't think it's that people are not coming into the city. I just think that there's just a chill going on right now. Obviously, the population is growing. And I think that probably, and I don't know what the realtor said, or if they were just saying it in jest or just, to be funny. But Seattle's housing market obviously is very expensive. And that hurts its chances. And this is what I said about Bellevue. Bellevue will grow, obviously. But when you're looking at the price of homes, it's kind of like, what's the point? What's really the point for a lot of people? And then when you look at Seattle, it's kind of the same thing. And so not only that, in Seattle's case, there's so many other things that, lead to people saying, price of houses is one, the cost of living outside of buying a home two, some of the negative press that's gotten in the news and documentaries and stuff like that doesn't help. For the some of the policies, if I didn't mention that, taxes and things like that. There's a lot of different things. And so, and the sickness. You guys see my shirt? It's the Kraken. Yeah, okay. Well, you guys don't care. It's the Seattle Kraken. But I think that the sickness has actually told employers that you don't need to necessarily just be right there in Seattle. See, Seattle's problem, and I said this before, Seattle should have looked at this region, the Puget Sound region, as a major economic hub. And if they would have really focused on partnering with cities like Bellevue and Tacoma and Everett, and said, look, you know what, we want to see this region grow. We want to be able to balance things out so that there's economic power throughout the whole area, not just concentrated in the core of Seattle. And if they would have entered some sort of partnership and actually worked actively to get companies to locate in different areas, work with Amazon and try to come up with some sort of incentive and plan along with other cities. Hold on one second. Okay, my bad. So had they worked with these other cities to kind of spread the wealth, if you will, and put companies and try to help them get to other places in the area, scatter it out a little bit, then I don't think that we would be having the situation that we're having. And because of that, and part of it's greed, part of it is, we ain't got to really do anything. They're coming here, so, let's ride the wave. That's created a huge economic problem because now you have a huge demand up there, and you had a huge demand of office space. So what were they doing? Building tons of big buildings in downtown Seattle. And then it was, we got a lot of people that want to live down here. What were they doing? Building tons of apartment buildings and condos downtown, right? And retail space. Well, they have several different malls and shopping areas and all of that downtown, right? They also have all the points of connection. So, Sound Transit, everything's a hub there. And it makes sense because it's the big city, right? It's the biggest city. It's the economic engine, but everything is just right there. Ferry terminals, everything's right there, right? And that is a stupid policy. That's a stupid thing to do. And the reason why that's stupid is because if you go to, I don't know, places like Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and yes, I'm using Port-au-Prince, Haiti as an example, that is the exact same thing. Everything is located in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, to the point that if there is a natural disaster, you can't get, typically, you're not able to deliver relief and supplies a lot of times to nearby areas or nearby cities in Haiti because all the major infrastructure is right there in Port-au-Prince. Before the earthquake, the main seaport, the airport, everything, all the highways rooted out of there. And then as you fanned out, it kind of got less and less and less. Only recently have they started putting more emphasis on having ports more farther outside of the city and other places so that it's a backup. They started having updating and modernizing airports in different areas, putting universities in different areas, because everything was right there. And then when things fell, it literally just destroyed the country because there was no redundancies in place. Seattle has done not nearly that drastic, but Seattle employers and the city has done really something kind of similar. All of the focus has been right there in Seattle. And then when the sickness comes, guess what? Cruises don't stop downtown. And so directly tied to the cruises is all those restaurants and businesses. That is their cash cow, part of it. So that takes a hit. The airport, not a lot of people flying in. So most of the people go to Seattle. And so now they're not flying in. All of those businesses are relying on tourists. Then offices. Because of remote working, nobody's really going to those offices. So guess what? All of those retail spaces and places are not getting the daytime crowds. So the economy got wrecked because everything's concentrated there. Then when you look at big headquarters, they're concentrated there. And it's also similar to Bellevue. The problem is that Amazon really doesn't spread out. It really doesn't. It focuses on one area and it just puts everything right there. One city, so to speak. Here it does focus on Bellevue and Seattle, but that's really the same thing. And so all it takes is one issue and poof. It takes the right issue. And so that's what happened to Seattle. Now the city, everything's leveraged because, we're going to, since we have all this revenue, we have all these employers, we have all this stuff, the projects we're going to do, the work we're going to do, all of that stuff is still hoping to get done, and there's no money because they're factoring in basically a bloated economy because everything is right there. It's just a bloated system. And then when you trim all that fat off, there's not enough to go around to do the things that they need to do. Cities that starve, like Tacoma and Everett and Olympia, they're feeling the impact, but not nearly as much. So when you see that Tacoma is still, for the second year, the hottest housing market, where homes sell the fastest of any place in the country, it's because Tacoma's a little bit more insulated. The same with most of the cities that are around here. A little more insulated. The economy is much more diverse. We don't have a lot of tech jobs. Most of what you see from the work at homes in Seattle are tech. So a lot of those offices are not. You see what I'm saying? Like Amazon, not. They're not in there. Facebook, all of those. So You may have a, skeleton crew, but it's not the thousands that they typically have. So that is the reason why people are like, I don't know if I want to move in, because the city keeps trying to add more and more taxes. It's trying to tax its way to fix the issue, and that's not going to work either, because basically those companies are now going to vote with their feet and say, I don't want to have to pay these extra taxes. And you also have some people who are making a certain amount of money who are going to basically, if they're in Seattle, have to pay essentially an income tax. So again, it's not going to work. So that's why. I mean, people are still moving there, right? They're still moving there. It's just not as fast as what it was. I think that the romance is kind of gone. And you're seeing a lot of buildings downtown that are just kind of just hanging out because they overbuilt it. There was not a concern to say, hey, plop a couple of those down in, Tukwila, for example. Plop a couple of those over in Renton. Plop a few of them up there in Everett. Plop a few down in Tacoma. And people will say, well, builders will go where the demand is. Is it really that much of a demand? You see what I'm saying? Like, it really isn't. And so that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. And so I think that the city itself has to really work as a unit, as a cohesive unit. There are some cities that do that. They don't compete. They don't necessarily compete like that when they're trying to build the economy itself, because it works a lot better. It works a lot better. It works better too when you're dealing with infrastructure. We have all these people that have to commute going north, going south if you're up in Everett. And so it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Whereas if you had more bigger employers down here, then you wouldn't have as many people that would have to commute as much or as far. You see what I'm saying? Like, it would be a lot better. I do like the approach of REI. REI is basically going away with that whole old school one headquarter type deal, and they're basically having regional hubs. And so they're hoping to put them in different locations along the area, because they were going to go up in Bellevue. And again, Bellevue is the same thing. So what they're doing in Bellevue is what they've done in Seattle. They're just moving it over to the east. And that doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It didn't work in Seattle, and eventually it's not going to work in Bellevue. So it's a matter of companies being smarter and saying, let's disperse things out a little bit. Now, what people are doing, the public is smart enough to realize, like, hey, that's just it's not sustainable. I can't afford to live in those areas. And so what do? They go where they can afford, or at least have a better quality of life. And so cities like Tacoma and some of these others are experiencing a population boom, because other people who are moving here are like, I'm not even going to pay attention to Seattle. It's just way out of my price range. And B, they actually look at Tacoma and say, hey, that might be an option. Excuse me. There's a lot of stuff that makes sense when you're looking at Everett, or you're looking at Tacoma, or you're looking at Olympia. They're smaller cities, right? Some people like that. The whole remote working. Some people like that. So what you're seeing up in Seattle is the workers may live down here, and the office is just sitting there. So when you have a few hundred I don't know the number, but let's say you have a few hundred workers from Amazon who live down here, and they go to the grocery store down here, and they go and get their car worked on, or whatever they're doing, they're spending their money down here, and they're not traveling up north. And so that money, not going out to get lunch during the middle of the day in those places, all of that adds up. It adds up. Down here, we have the opposite, where people want to go out, and it's like there's so many restrictions they can't. I mean, there's obviously people want to do it up in Seattle too, don't get me wrong. But down here, there's so many people now who really want to go out to restaurants and that type of thing. And there's just not enough. We have the opposite situation, whereas they have a glut of restaurants. We don't have enough. So you're seeing the slow shift, but I don't necessarily agree that Seattle's not growing or no one's interested. It's just that people are finding other options. Okay. Make sure you join the Discord. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, I will see you. Take care.